Let's try to be. We were talking about before this episode, and we got into quite of an argument about a lot of things. So it's time to switch things and try to be professional. So in this episode, we are going to dive into
Not going to happen.
what? Be professional.
No, we're going to be professional, but we are still going to fight about a lot of things because that's fun.
So let's dive into the fascinating history of computer IT magazines.
Why?
Because we spent too much time creating those magazines, both you and me.
Oh, man.
I've been doing that for 17 years. I think it's something like 15 years as editor-in-chief of one magazine or the other. I was doing magazines for mobile phones. I was doing a general-purpose IT magazine. You were doing hardware testing and a lot of things in
hardware editor,
another
And then website.
IT magazine. So
We watched in real time everything that we are going to discuss in this episode.
yes, we watched in real time. We experienced it, and as a side note, the European part of the IT magazines went through the transformation much faster and much a lot of. It was a lot of time before that started to happen in the United States, because the United States has a market that is much bigger, and it has a lot of inertia. So a lot of people kept buying magazines, while at the same time magazines basically went through here in Croatia. Out of the three major magazines, only two exist, and they exist
On the fringes of
on the
existence.
fringes of its existence, and they exist by name only, basically, because their relevance is, I think, smaller by the day. They are trying to make themselves relevant by organizing conferences that are mostly
And public projects.
and public projects and
computers
everything
and
else.
whatnot, yeah.
But this is not the computer magazine. This is just a publishing operation trying to survive. I have nothing to say about the projects that they do. One of them is hosted right above us right now, and
If you hear any bouncy sounds, that's
yes,
what it
so
is.
they have a conference that is hosted above us
have a
right
party.
now, above our studio in the lobby, and it's a good conference. But a good conference does not make an IT magazine.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the early days. Let's talk about how the publications became from a hobby to a source of information, how they formed a new generation of IT people, how they created the cultural impact that we weren't expecting and nobody was expecting, how they influenced the society back then, how are they influencing it now, because they are. Also, let's dive into why did they go broke? Why did they vanish? What happened to the major players on the market? What was the problem with the internet, and why did the internet kill the printed magazine? And let's talk about all the other websites, blogs, and everything else, so digital media. And let's try to understand why this citizen journalism that was that was mentioned so many times in the beginning of the 2000s, why did it kill the printed media in the end? On that said note, this is That IT Show, where talk meets tech and vice versa. And let's roll the intro. Now,
Okay, now I'm going to start this time. Let's talk about the first magazines that we had, let's say, an experience with when we were younger, if you can remember that. But specifically, I don't want to make this episode too much about our past, if it's okay with you. It's not necessarily a trip down the memory lane of what we used to do. We can just mention it on the fringes of a discussion. I want to keep wanted to keep this a little bit more about the international magazines, very popular ones, huge ones, the biggest ones, stuff like that, if you agree. If you don't, we can switch. No problem.
okay, as always, let me
No, let me.
let
Let me.
let me just say one sentence. The first thing that was IT related, international, and high-end production that I saw was not a magazine.
Okay.
It was basically a catalog, mail order catalog for IT equipment that I got in the 80s from the States. And I think this is one of the things that formed my opinion on how this thing should look like.
For the good and the bad of it.
Yes.
Okay. That's cool. Okay. But specifically, which, let's say, foreign or international IT magazine was the first one that you ever read, if you remember?
Byte.
So, American Byte.
Yes, American Byte.
Okay. For me, Byte was one of those, definitely. But a little bit, probably a couple of years after you, because you are, I'm a couple of years younger.
I don't think it matters because the Byte magazine itself was way above our heads when it came out.
Oh,
Because
we're going to have
were
a
too young.
discussion.
We
about
were
that.
too young
to understand.
and I think that Dr. Dobbs was one of the magazines that I read, but it was completely off for what I understood. So basically, it was much too complicated for me, and I didn't have the enough knowledge to even understand the
Basic concepts.
basics. And the other things was that all of you listening to us, we are from Croatia. The Croatia itself, being part of Yugoslavia back then when we were starting and so on, we didn't have this much context to be able to understand the magazines back then. There were a couple of things that we couldn't even understand. So, for example, ordering technical equipment by mail. This is something that was completely foreign to us. Being able to actually order different things and getting it was completely foreign to us. We were used to going to the shop, buying something, and then getting it back. So magazines were a lot different to us because we were lacking context.
Okay. For me, it was, Byte was also one of the first ones, but I think that the first one that I read was actually PC Magazine or something like that. I think it was PC Mag, which started its journey through IT magazine history, something in 1982. No, 1982, I think it was. Byte was 1970s. This
Okay.
vastly different. I was probably something like, I don't know, 10 years old when I read my first copy of the magazine. It was very fascinating to me, and my experience completely mimics what you just said, which was that I did not understand anything what was written on those pages. Please keep in mind that we started basically learning English in 4th or 5th grade, depending on which generation you were. So in order for us to understand those foreign magazines, you had to learn at least a little bit of English first. So that's why I said that I was probably 9 or 10 years old when I started reading it after some English classes. But having in mind that you just mentioned Byte, I think that that's a very good, let's say, starting point for our discussion for multiple different reasons, not only for the reasons that I'm sure you know. In the past couple of years, Byte magazine has been on the forefront of my mind a lot of times, but it's not that reason. It's actually that as a magazine that was founded in 1975, coincidentally, that's the year you were born, if I remember correctly.
74.
Well, you were in older. You are more ancient. That's
Yes.
2/3 of the way there. Yeah. Actually, so as a magazine that was founded back then, it wasn't actually the first hugely popular IT magazine. That honor goes to a completely different magazine, actually. I don't know if you remember this one, but there was a magazine called Popular Electronics, which started production in the 50s, 1954 or something like that, by Ziv Davis.
Yes.
I actually read a couple of issues of that many years later when I was still young, much younger. And final issue of that was in 2003. Coincidentally, that's the year when I graduated from college as well, and started working actually in a computer magazine. Although I worked for the same computer magazine as you did back then, but on a more contractual basis.
I'm just going to say that
Yeah,
Wikipedia also states that I'm still the editor-in-chief of the magazine.
Yeah, because you were until it folded.
It didn't fold.
No,
It just
the
switched to
printed
digital.
magazine.
The print magazine folded.
But nobody reads it in digital form. Come on.
To be completely honest, nobody reads any.
I'm not saying that
magazines.
as a
No, 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 no.
malicious thing.
It's just a
true.
fact of life.
It's true.
So just continue with the thing, because I'm trying to look for one single thing, because I want to talk about a single topic of the magazines of the yesteryear. But let's continue, please.
I'm actually on that route as well, and you feel free to join in. For me, Byte, English version, and then actually we had for a couple of years the Croatian version as well, was by far the most influential magazine on my life.
Okay.
There are a couple of reasons for that. The first reason, the international version, so the English version, that I only read a couple of issues of when I was younger. I'm not talking about now. Now I have all of them.
Okay.
But back then I only read a couple of issues, and I was staggered at the amount of information there, but I didn't really understand that because it was, as you said, way over our heads. We couldn't comprehend that. But it also showed me, maybe even on a subconscious level, something that's going to be my future career, although I didn't know it at the time. And also it did quite a bit, it did quite a number on the way in which I perceived the magazines should be, which came in very handily many years later when I started working in one of them. But for me, actually, the even more formative experience was way later, in the, let's say, the start of the 90s, if I remember correctly. That's when the Byte Croatian version was on the market.
Yes, something.
was
1992, I think.
91, 92, something like that, yes. That I read religiously. Every single issue, I scalped money from my allowance and whatnot to buy every single one of those. And I'm still looking for copies of those because I would like to have them, because they're very difficult to get. There are some in the libraries, in our city libraries actually, but I would have to go there, physically copy them, blah, blah, blah. It's complicated.
You want copies of the Byte magazine from the
Croatian, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, our colleague said that he's going to bring some, but he hasn't so far. So let's.
I know who has all of them, so
I'm willing to buy them.
Okay, okay, fine. But
actually,
anyways, okay.
So for me, the formative experience of reading Croatian Byte was related to a couple of columns. Actually, it's not necessarily the whole magazine, although I quickly started reading it cover to cover religiously. I was very young back then. It was my starting to drink coffee years, in the beginning of the 90s, high school years. But I did start to read that religiously from cover to cover, basically from, I don't know, issue 3 or 4 when it came to our market. For me, the formative experience, and I mentioned this in one of the episodes, was related to music. And one of the last columns was written by a music legend, a producer called Željko Janda. It was about MIDI, and at that particular time, I was kind of starting to get into the digital music in terms of not listening to it. I was listening to it for years already. It was more about creating it as a part of a band and production and whatnot. So it was a time when I kind of like, it's going to sound way deeper than it is, kind of met the first synthesizer that I had played in the studio, a couple of them actually, which was hugely consequential for my life later. Nowadays I have dozens of them or more. But for me, it was about the way in which those articles were written, which was, I think that those articles would still stand the test of time today.
They are standing the test of time today, because if you take, even if out of context, if you take articles published in the 80s,
this is the 90s, but still.
Okay, but if you take even the articles from the 80s, if you take them for what they stand for example, 6502 assembly programming, Z80 assembly programming, so the things that were topical in that particular decade, they make sense. You can still use them today. Okay, you are going to switch to emulators. You're going to switch to technology that not it didn't only not exist then. It wasn't feasible then, and now it's completely different. But they are just created in a so professional way that people were able to do articles that I wouldn't call them timeless, but they
I would.
represent. Okay, let's not go into this is the best thing that is going to happen next 1,000 years, but they are written so professionally that they can be still be used as guides. They are not aging. They are just
Well,
representing
that's
the
because of the
technology.
quality
Yes,
of them.
and I wanted, since we said that we are not going to talk about our own experiences, and then you started it, I'm going to go with my own experience and say this one. When I was much younger, so let's call it 10, 11, 12 years old, I saw the bite. The bite was way over my head. I saw Svet Computera and Računari and all the
The local ones, yeah, yeah.
locals. And the first thing that was interesting to me is were the pages that were dedicated to games. Because
Already done?
yes, because
Okay.
I had a ZX Spectrum, and in the 82, 83, 84, when I was reading those were not only the source of information about how things were working, but also the source of information for different programs that you could get either on a tape or more probably written down in the magazine. So you needed to copy it by typing it in on a Spectrum, and then you got a limited game, whatever. But this was one of those things. And the other thing that was, I would say, adjacent to it, I was reading the entirety of Samsung Meister. Because I was interested in tinkering.
Your own master.
So Sons of Meister was something that was there was a magazine that was dedicated to
Bob the Builder kind of
DIY,
thing.
DIY.
DIY, yeah.
So it was a DIY magazine. DIY magazine is almost direct translation to creation. So Sons of Meister basically means you are doing your own work. So DIY, and what amazed me is that it was much closer to me because I couldn't understand how things were doing. I don't know how to create a table out of wood, but it explained to me how things are working and how things are made. And this is something that I couldn't get from any other source. And then when I switched over to the computer magazines, this was the same thing but much closer to me, because I didn't do woodworking, but I could copy paste programs from the magazine. So I was able to do the stuff that the magazine was telling me how to do it, and I was able to do something that was interesting to me.
Two things.
Yes.
First, you misunderstood me when I said we're not going to talk about our history. I was specifically referring to our history of working in a magazine.
Oh, this wasn't easy. This
So
one is
I don't-
easy.
I don't
When I
have-
started working in the magazine, I stopped reading
yeah.
magazines.
No,
Yes. So
But I just don't want to go into that. But yes, our history of reading magazines, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So that's the first thing. But there is a second one that I want to kind of like kick you with. You mentioned woodworking.
yes.
Do you think that this had a little bit more of a formative experience on you? Because I know for a fact that both of us spent a lot of time in the past couple of years watching YouTube channels with that sort of stuff. Is this something that comes natural to you just as it does with me? Because I read the same magazine when I was younger as well.
I think that
You
comes.
think it's related to that?
I think this is the natural thing that comes with everybody who's interested in engineering. Because
Okay.
more or less they're going to find a hobby that is going to enable them to do whatever is the opposite of what they're doing every day. So if you are in a stressful, if you're in a stressful business, you're probably going to take on fishing or golfing or whatever. If you are doing programming, you're going to try to do something with your hands. So either woodworking, metalwork, I don't know, any kind of I wouldn't call it art, but any kind of craft that enables you to do something with your hands. Mostly because I'm completely without any sense of being able to create something that looks good. So
Me too.
so I like to create things that are written down. I like to do
Engineering stuff.
engineering stuff that I'm able to reproduce based on the diagrams. So woodworking is a logical thing, because if you want to create a table, you don't need to be creative. You just need to understand how to read the diagram and then how to reproduce what's inside the diagram. So this is the next logical step when you want to step away from the computer and do something.
Okay.
So I think that a lot of people, and I know a lot of people, want to do either masonry, having their own garden, planting things, doing
vineyard.
I know a guy who is right now growing tomatoes in numbers that are completely insane
Bonkers.
to me. Yes, he has something like 400 different types of tomatoes in seeds. So he's doing this because he's an IT guy and he wants to do something. So he has the whole balcony full of the small tomatoes that he's then replanting to another place. But okay, so people are doing something, and I think that what formed us was the idea of having an article that is not talking about the war, the politics, whatever, but it is instead a set of instructions that enable you to understand something and then try to do it.
Deeper meaning of that, actually.
Yes.
The article that was about something that was impossible to achieve for us.
Okay, possible or impossible, but
No, you cannot overstate how important that is for human development.
But I think that the most important thing is that when you compare computer magazines, DIY magazines, and so on to any other type of magazine, you are going to there is a complete difference in tone. Magazines that are trying to make I don't know, columns, statements, whatever, so political statements about war and whatever, or political statements about whatever between whatever states, they're trying to get across an opinion. When you read a magazine that is designed talking about computers, they are talking about actual facts.
Yeah. Okay.
So they're better or worse at describing some set of facts, and they're trying to get across some technology, but they're useful because you learn something new, and this is usually or should be completely stripped of any political or any
Emotional.
I wouldn't call it emotion, but it's usually if the article is good, it has emotions, but towards the technology.
Yes, correct.
Not towards anything. So first, they're positive. And the article there is an extremely small number of articles that are going to be dismissive about the technology, especially in the older magazines.
Correct.
Today on the internet, everybody has an opinion. Also, everybody has its own backside, so this is one of those things that I don't care about.
Mike Tyson said it well.
Yes, I'm not going to quote him on that. But as I said, I think that what drives me to read articles about technologies is that if an article is written well, it is going to be positive, it is going to be descriptive, it is going to informative, it is going to be something that's going to be able that I'm going to be able to parse and then understand the overview of the technology that I'm dealing with.
Okay, so with that being said, that's a good description. Going back to Byte, I remember reading some of those articles when I was much younger, definitely all of them going over my head. But then a couple of years ago, I kind of like went back to the journey of starting to read it. And I think I mentioned this in one of the episodes. I was bonkers. I went completely insane. I wanted to kind of like scrap my whole IT journalist career, which I considered to be quite okay. Actually, I wrote articles that were quite good and all of that, but they were nowhere near the level of what Byte used to do in the 70s. Basically, for all of you who are interested in these topics, I would strongly encourage you to go to archive.org and search for Byte magazine, because there are old releases of old issues of Byte there. Open the first edition of Byte, and after you go to the first 20-ish pages or so, which are the introduction, why Byte exists, something, intro article, this and that, editorial, the next two articles are already like a 1-2 knockout punch directly to your face, if you are into IT and if you are into writing about IT specifically, because the first two articles there are about recycled used integrated circuits. And then the next one, which is my favorite almost first article in a magazine of all time, is about the serial ports and the using of serial ports in what used to be a computer of the era, with all of the, let's say, standards and technologies and baud rates and the explanation about encoding and the technology. And then you also had the integrated circuit design, which you could easily do with your, thingy. And you also had the assembly and whatnot code to make a driver for it and whatnot. And this goes on and on and on for the next 15 pages. And 2 years ago when I went to summer vacation, as you know, but very important experience for me. Actually, when I went through that article, I closed it down and I wanted to kind of like punch myself in the face because the level of that, which used to be basically a mainstream IT magazine, which is what it was insane. And it stayed that all the way to the end.
Okay, but okay, Byte is an outlier for two things. First, it was one of the. I was checking the numbers. It was one of the most. It was one of the biggest magazines back then.
Yes.
They seized circulation printed media relatively quickly. They ceased publication in 1998.
Correct.
So way before all of them, all the rest of the guys.
They had
And
loads of international editions all over the world.
The other thing is that we need to remember that media between different countries is different. When we were doing media here in Croatia, most of the circulation was sold on the basically on the kiosks. So you bought most of your magazines directly. Byte, PC Magazine, and all the magazines in the United States were first catering to their subscribers, so they had a huge subscriber base.
Yes.
And the amount of money that they got from the subscribers was enormous.
I read
Also they had the enormous amounts of ads.
Yeah.
Byte had an issue that was more than 1,000 pages long. PC Magazine, I checked, had a issue that was 800 pages long, and then they switched to bi-weekly magazine because they could then fit half a thousand, so 500 pages each 2 weeks, and most of that was advertising. And in Croatia, you couldn't do this for two reasons. First, you
smaller market, much smaller.
much smaller market. This is one thing, and the other thing is that we were limited by law on how many advertisers we could put in the magazine.
There is still some of that.
Yes. You
to
you
this
need to have more than you need to have less than 30% of the magazine in the advertisers. If you want to have more, you need to create more pages of the content. So this was entirely different. And it says here that in 1983, the revenue of the Byte magazine was $36.6 million.
Back then,
Back then,
probably like 200 million today.
so we can check how much it is, but the point I'm trying to make is that when you have this amount of money, you can do a lot of planning. This is the first thing, and then you can invest in people and knowledge, and then
But
suddenly.
that's not how they started. They started with people who already had enormous amount of knowledge.
Okay, but when you come to a point when you have enough money, you can pay the best of the best to write the articles for you, or to do the proofreading for the articles for you.
Sorry to say that out loud, but that's the way in which it should be.
The only way when you can have if you want to have quality content, you need to have peer-reviewed content. And this peer review comes from professors that are in the major universities, people who are in the field, working in the field, and they're not cheap. You cannot, right now it's normal, not only here, but also in the States or in the whatever market there is, it's normal for a single journalist to cover, I don't know, tens of different types of markets, to create, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of characters per month, and none of this is reviewed. So they're doing it mostly just to fill in the space, and this drives the quality of the content way down. If you are unable to create, I don't know, a custom survey, if you are unable to afford paying somebody who is a professional in their field to fact check your survey results, you are going to create something that is going to be, I wouldn't call it bad, but it is going to be
Not as good as it could be.
not as good as it could be, or it is going to be worse than that. It is going to be average, if at best, because you cannot be a master of all the trades.
Yeah, jack of none.
Yes.
I actually, when I started reading those old issues of Byte, I also read more than a few, let's say, articles, some books as well about some of the people who were there at the beginning like Jerry Pournelle, etc. He has a Chaos Manor site still up and running. He passed away sadly some years ago, but some of the things that those guys used to do were crazy. And there are some actually there are some history data in the first edition of the magazine as well, in the introductory article. But that actually kind of, I think, subconsciously stayed with me all the way through my youth, all the way to through my college, and to my first employment, which was in a computer, basically my second employment, but never mind, in the computer magazine. Although I used to, as I said, I used to write for your magazine when I was still in college for the Linux column, but I didn't know back then if I could make something out of that, which was strange enough. I was lucky in a sense there. Then after Byte, some of the biggest magazines in the world included PC Magazine, founded in 1982. Actually, they also have, they live in Google Books. You have loads of the archive all the way to early 2000s, I think, on Google Books, and you can read all about that. There was Computer Shopper, PC World. Some of them are actually still here, but I know Computer Shopper closed shop, I think, in 2020 in a funny way. Said that, but it is what it is. PC World, 1983. Macworld, 1984. Wired Magazine, 1993. Actually, that was way later than everything else. But what kind of like jump-started my internal review of what happened with the computer magazines, and kind of jump-started my wish to do an episode about this, was something that I read a couple of days ago in one of the articles, which kind of mentioned the fact that Maximum PC and Mac Life, some two what used to be very popular magazines, also went digital. And basically, in the US, I would have to go and find if there are any IT magazines that are in printed media. Probably there are some smaller ones, but most of them are either already dead in print, not necessarily altogether, or on the way to being, completely phased out.
But the motivation for this episode was the information that the last two of the magazines that had the national national circulation went digital.
Yeah,
digital only. I was checking on the numbers right now. So let's first talk about $36 million that we're talking about the Byte magazine in 1983. Mm-hmm. This is equivalent to $109 million today in revenue in a single year.
Sorry, I was just double wrong.
Yes. So 109, so $110 million plus or minus. TechCrunch, that is right now considered biggest IT portal in the market, has the estimated revenue of $22.5 million per year. Mm-hmm. So they have 5 times less revenue in the market that is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And this is way less costs.
Yes, and this is one of the biggest problems with the IT magazines and everything else, because they cannot afford quality content. They are trying to, but they cannot afford it because they don't have enough money to be able to. When you want quality content in whatever field you are in, you need to be able to pay people. And you need to pay people
on top of people who are going to check on those people.
No, but you also need to pay people to create a content that is going to be based on quality, not quantity. You don't want to be in a situation where you need to pay for a person to create a certain amount of characters per month. You want to say, okay, Vedran, can you create an article for me on whatever
topic.
Some topic, let's call it, I don't know, difference between the architectures in the on the CPU architectures in the market, and then I need to give you enough time and enough space so you can do your job. So contact people, contact manufacturers, read books, go to libraries, acquire
scientific
images, scientific papers, and so on. And it is going to take time. I can probably whip up an article on different architectures in an afternoon, or I can take a month and then create an in-depth article that is going to be amazing. But the difference is going to be the cost. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to be able to create only this article. And right now, journalists need to create an article each day, or a couple of
Multiple
articles.
articles. Yeah, that's what journalists do, generally speaking.
And this is the only explanation. The ad market is not there anymore because the digital marketing is way less expensive than it was when you needed to pay for the magazine marketing. The number of different companies that they even need national exposure, so they require national advertising, is small. You cannot get a lot of money out of largest companies because they don't care. So suddenly your entire ad space or the number of your advertisers is shrinking, while at the same time the amount of money that you can get out of them based on the place that you can sell them is even shrinking even more. So you cannot expect that you're going to make more. And the other thing that pays is the organic or whatever you call it, clicks through. So you need to create clickbaity titles because you need eyeballs to be on your portal, and this annoys people. So suddenly you have a content that you cannot pay for. It needs to be titled in such a way that nobody wants to read it, and you are still lacking money to pay for a better quality material. So this is not going to end well.
If I can just shortly go on a semi-tangent there. I had this very discussion with the owner of the company that I used to work for, Computer Magazine, when I was leaving.
Okay.
It was related to some internal struggles, but it was also related to the fact that I openly stated that we should start putting much more effort into web.
Yes.
This was in 2004.
Yes.
Okay. So I definitely saw the writing on the wall. It was clear as day that the web is the future, and then various aspects of web are what's going to continue the idea of computer magazines alive. It used to be sites like TechCrunch. Nowadays it's YouTube, and it can be something else as well. Who knows what's going to be what's going to happen in the future? But for what it's worth, the switch to digital is something that you kind of mentioned. It happened quickly in Europe. It happened quickly altogether. I'm not just pointing out the geographies. When you think about how long of a run the printed media had from 1954, when the first kind of IT magazine came out, all the way to, let's say, 2023, when the last one shut down. We're talking about 80 years.
Okay.
And in that time span of 80 years, since 2000 and pick your number, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, doesn't really matter. In the past 15 years or so, everything went digital.
Okay.
So the switch happened quite quickly, and you needed to be, hence some of the mistakes that I saw people make, and that's why I started my own website. You wanted to be at the forefront of that, not at the back end of that. In a sense, you wanted to ride the wave. Otherwise, what's the business there? So I think that, yes, you're completely correct in the sense of how all of that happened. But there is one other thing that needs to be heavily kind of highlighted as the reason why all of this happened. And that is the amount. You mentioned it kind of like in a sense from production standpoint. You need a lot of time versus today journalists need to write a lot of articles per day, blah blah blah. All of that tends to be true, so that's all cool. But there's actually an advantage of that as well, because when you're writing an article, you're doing a monthly production or 2-week production. I can write that article that you said just mentioned earlier on some kind of website. I can do it in an afternoon, which means that I can at worst be 29 to 30 days ahead of you, or at best at least 1 day ahead of you. And today, as we mentioned in the Twitter episode, it's all about being the fastest, first, whatnot.
I think that the only I had this discussion.
The production time, the lead time.
Yes. The lead time is one of those things, but there is a place for a printed media.
Oh, I agree.
And I had this discussion in my magazine's editorial board maybe 10 years ago, or it was 12 years ago, uh, where I was trying to explain that the only thing that the printed media, having a lead time of a month, the only way that the print media can survive is by
Quality.
providing not only quality but providing different kind of quality, because almost all of the print media that we are talking about right now in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s were providing the same amount of information or the same information that we get from the internet right now. So comparison of whatever CPU was out there, whatever motherboard was out there, whatever part of the hardware was out there. So your favorite 8-bit computer or whatever. And I think that in order to survive, the analog media or the paper media
I like
can
analog.
either provide information that is highly relevant to the consumer in a particular market. So I don't care if the PC X is faster than the PC Y, but I care if the PC X is available on my market, where it is available, and how much money does it cost. And this is something that can only be done by a local journalist that is actually paying attention and trying to provide information based on the normal market data. This is the first thing. So the comparison of the local information, and this is something that is, and you are usually unable to create out of the internet information. And the other thing is opinions and deep dives into technologies. Because you don't get a lot of those on the internet. So
Oh, you do, but they might be informed wrong.
yes, but for example, if I wanted to create a magazine right now, what I would do, I would call it probably something boring like standards, and then I would create a magazine
For
that
love of Christ, why?
because I'm just playing with the most boring name ever. But then I would create a compendium of all the standards for, I don't know, video production, and then create all the pinouts, all the standards, descriptions, encodings, and so on. And if you put it on paper in such a way that it can be referenced, I think it would sell. It would make
Yeah,
sense.
it would have value.
Yes, so because I want to create another type of value, because sometimes you just need something on paper. But trying to reproduce digital media on paper is stupid.
Yeah, it's a
It's
crazy idea.
Yes,
altogether.
it's an idea. The only thing that you can do it is by pushing out a newsletter every day.
There are still websites out there, crunching out and doing a lot of articles, very long ones, etc. Most people don't read all of that, but
Yes, but okay. The other thing is that the attention span of average user is
way shorter.
way shorter.
I mean, Byte did, for example, a whole magazine issue about computer music systems in 1978. Robot simulation in 1978. And don't get me started on artificial intelligence and stuff like that. Artificial intelligence, 1979. Actually, we had this discussion with our students in one of our courses, because a lot of them are not necessarily informed well, which is okay. That's why they're here. We are here to teach them. They don't understand that artificial intelligence, machine learning are concepts of the 50s. It's not something that just suddenly appeared out of thin air. It's not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination. But my problem with all of that is actually, I understand the attention span thing. I agree with you. You're completely on point there. I think that if the printed magazines of the quality of Byte of that era, of whatever, doesn't really matter what the name of the magazine is, if they were to come back and offer the value that you just mentioned, I still think that they would sell.
Yes, they would sell, but
Not in the numbers of the yesteryear. But
I
still.
think that one of the things that happened is that people stopped caring about buying quality content.
I mean, the younger generation doesn't necessarily read the papers or
Yes,
whatever.
but
We are a generation who grew up on comic books and whatnot. Maybe they're not. So maybe the
yes,
idea
but
of printed is different
no,
for
it's
them.
not just the idea of the printed. The idea of paying a certain amount of money every day to get informed. If I told you, okay, let's say Croatian newspapers are right now something like €1.50, I think. If you want to buy the entire month of papers, it's €45. I don't think you can make an average person buy the entire month of newspapers for €45 because €45 is
Too much money.
too much money. It used to be that expensive back way then, but people were used to it. Right now, they're not going to do it. So even if you created a magazine that is only €5 per month, I don't think that people even have the the perception that they want to go to the kiosk and buy the magazine, or that they need to subscribe, because people are not subscribing to the magazines that are providing quality content. You have in the States, in every country in the world, you have a portal that is providing more or less quality content on the local news, and they are struggling because they don't have this subscriber base. The subscriber base was much bigger back way then, and the biggest thing for me that is strange is that this happened mostly to the IT and the technology portals.
Exactly.
For example, I just looked up. There is a Log Cabin magazine still having print in the United States.
The Grand Designs
Okay,
TV show, which it has been a printed magazine for decades.
yeah. So basically, the higher the technology that the magazine is talking about, it is more likely that it has gone out of business.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Okay.
It's logical.
Yes, but it just doesn't make sense when you think about it.
No, I understand, but still, from a standpoint of people of today, they just don't have the habit of consuming such content.
And we don't have the habit of using it. I was just thinking about one thing that completely not only went out of business, but went out of use. And it's still one of the most amazing and useful things that there is. Do you remember those engineering handbooks, reference books,
Yes.
that were printed on extremely thin paper and had hundreds and hundreds of pages? There is almost no equivalent of this on the internet.
Yes.
And still, people don't buy them, but they are amazingly useful tools. I have a couple of those because I like them. I have a couple of those at home, and people think that I'm completely strange for this. But if you have one of those books, when you need to reference something that is remotely connected to engineering, it is going to be in it. And this was done at the great expense. Because you needed hundreds and hundreds of people, associates, to be able to double check the mathematics, the engineering, the formulas, and everything else. But it's an amazing tool that nobody uses, but it is still useful. So it has become forgotten, but it still exists. And
So is a calculator.
but you can you have the calculator in the Google. But you cannot have a simple reference that you can believe in on anywhere on the internet.
Scientific papers.
Encyclopedias.
They are also something that's
Because
foregone conclusion.
Wikipedia is not an encyclopedia.
It's not. I mean, and it's different to talk about Microsoft Encarta from back in the day and Wikipedia. Sorry, it's a different thing to discuss. Or Britannica or something like that. It's not even on the same plane of existence.
Yes, I was just browsing through. I was cleaning out my library at home, and I ran into Larousse, and it is amazing how condensed and how good the content inside Larousse is. So it's basically Britannica from the French, for the French speaking people. You have small Larousse and Petit Larousse or the normal Larousse. And it's an amazing reference book. And it doesn't even compare to what Wikipedia has. It compares to, Wikipedia is much better in things that are newer, that are happening quickly and so on. But when it comes to topics that are based on the history, languages, different things that happened way before. Wikipedia doesn't even compete. It is not in the
Yeah.
in the same
Galaxy.
in the same galaxy.
Yeah.
So we need more verified content. We need more verified information, and this is
I'd say that that's a general thing, not only in IT.
yes, verified content is expensive, and when you don't have the business plan that enables you to buy quality content, you end up with losing part of the history because IT magazines were part of the history. They were part of the forming things that formed a whole generation.
It's still formative for everything that's happening today. So yes, it's much more than that, but still, yeah.
I think that one of the things that let's now talk about the content. Uh, do you think that whatever do you think about I don't know PC Chip, VD, Byte Magazine, PC Magazine, whatever
Our local
our
magazines.
local magazines, however you look at it, even if you were I don't know a hardcore gamer, when you bought Byte Magazine, you got your gaming
Section,
kick,
yeah.
section, you got your kicks, your gaming kicks. But since you got the paper and it was in your hands, you were reading a lot about other topics. So you got informed about topics that you wouldn't normally care about. And then sometimes something caught your eye and you were reading in depth about it, and then you got the idea of how to use this. So you became much more knowledgeable in the entire IT. Right now, when you go to a gaming website, you're going to be just bombarded with information that is going to be strictly gaming, without anything outside of the gaming.
Yeah, specialization.
So you're going to be specializing, but also you're going to be missing on a lot of information that is extremely useful to you.
Agreed?
And I think that this is one of the things that we lost with the IT media.
Absolutely agreed. Okay. Actually, recently, a couple of, I think it was something like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, I was watching this episode of Retro Recipes, very popular YouTube channel that's growing like crazy. And the guy who's the owner of the channel, who also happens to be a voice actor, very famous in Hollywood, became the editor of the Zap 64 magazine for the next couple of years.
Okay.
Zap 64.
Yes.
You know what it
Yeah.
is?
Yes. I know.
So basically, that's I think it's completely virtual magazine, bi-monthly or something like that. But we're talking about the Commodore 64 magazine, and Commodore 64s, I mean, they're relics of the past from the perspective of today. I'm not dissing on them. I love C64. I have it at home.
But I think
But
that
still-
you didn't follow the market, because both ZX Spectrum and C64 have thriving forums.
Yeah.
They have reached I think they have reached the point where the user base is not dropping anymore, because people who are C64 zealots are going to become remain C64 zealots. So there is a
Yeah,
couple.
about our age.
Yes, there is a couple of thousands of users that are still using it. They're creating games for it. They're creating. There was a. I know I checked that there was a couple of releases for the ZX Spectrum in the games in the last year.
Yeah.
And they're releasing games. They're releasing demos. They're playing with the technology, and I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, agreed.
But this is something that isn't paying any bills. This is the
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, I know. This is voluntary work for the most part. Some of these magazines are still commercial, but it's not like they're making millions or.
I think that being commercial in this space means that you are just making ends meet. This is not commercial by any stretch of your imagination.
Well, you might. A lot of the people who are into these things consider what they're doing to be kind of like public service.
Yes. But if you want to be commercial, it pays much better to just paint other people's nails and make
Trim their
money.
nails as well,
Yes,
etc.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
or
So manicure pays much better than trying to create a Commodore 64 magazine or any
Or a
magazine
book.
or a book.
as
Yes.
we learned.
Yes, but I don't think that anything that we did or anything that is happening is wrong.
I was just kidding, of course.
No, okay, but I don't think that anything that is happening in this kind is wrong. I think that the problem is that we lost the ability to concentrate on a certain topic, Everybody's
Okay.
trying to read about everything, and then we all became master of nuns.
So we went from reading The Art of Computer Programming to consuming TikToks. That's your metaphor.
Yes. What
I
was the
agree.
last? What was the last comic book that you read?
I read Alan Ford comic books constantly.
Okay, but it's a topical comic book that has its own story arc, characters, style, art, and so on. A lot of people that I know today, kids don't have any comic books that they have read any,
Yeah, I know.
at
I
any point
mentioned
in
that
their
earlier.
in their past.
Yeah, I know. I
They
think
they can talk about whatever it is.
Marvel.
No, I'm going to call it Smurf Patrol, whatever. So the Paw Patrol, Smurfs, whatever. But they know the characters, but that's just it. They're just not comic books, but just small episodes of whatever it is. So animated series, and that's it. They are not into reading. They're not into when you open up. I don't know, Alan Ford. Alan Ford is specific to this part of the Europe. It's a very specific thing. It even
Excellent comic.
Yes, but it has its own. There is a scientific paper based on how specific Alan Ford was and
Yeah.
why Alan Ford was specific in this part of the.
Very religious
Yes,
following.
but okay, Martin Mysteria,
Love that. Zagor.
Zagor, or all the other different comic books that were in Asterix that were popular in this part of the Europe. They have their own world. They have their own art, and you can just open any part. Okay, you can read the comic book as such, but you can also open it and then admire the art. And this is not something that you can do when you're watching a movie. This is completely
Agreed.
different.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that's going to probably become lost art if everything, continues happening in the way in which it has been happening. Because comic books are still a big market. It's not like it's small, but I don't think that. I should check. I have no information right now from the top of my head. Probably it's not as big as it used to be.
I think that the most of the comic book market right now is just people collecting comics, and just publishing comics just to be collected. So limited editions that are going to be extra expensive just because they are limited edition, because they have a small circulation, they are printed on extremely expensive papers, and so on and so on and so on.
Okay, so
Another thing, the only thing that I have seen when it comes to new media, not IT involving, is or was the series of different YouTube videos that are also limited to being too long for the TikTok generation. The best example that I know that I can think of right now is the one that is called Every Frame a Painting. Do you know what the one?
no,
This
maybe
one
I've
is
seen it, but
this one is analyzing movies, but it is analyzing movies from the perspective of them being an graphic art. So they are not trying to analyze movies by content. They're trying to analyze scenes, the way the colors
so
are
no,
used,
not from the movie recap perspective, more from a technical perspective in a sense, or
from the art
artistic.
perspective, artistic. So
Yeah, okay.
how
How it is recorded.
how the director of photography thought about it, what the different colors, what do they mean,
It's very
how the
interesting.
so it's a thing that is interesting because it is trying to concentrate on the art as such. It is not trying to just do the
Storytelling.
citizen journalism part that I mentioned, just giving you a small synopsis and then saying this movie is bad. They are trying to explain to you what was the idea of the movie, how much thought went into it, and they're usually talking about movies that are not whatever Fast and Furious 2700, whatever, because those movies are not even comic books. They are just something to be consumed and then left to rot in the digital era. So IT magazines were too specific. They didn't have enough money to create content, and this killed them. And this was-
Internet killed them. Money went in the other direction, killed them as
But
well.
I think the
But
internet
they're-
killed them.
But also the Fast and Furious approach, while you're on the topic of creating a lot of content which wasn't on the market fast enough because of the way in which production works, also played a role because websites were always going to be faster.
I think that the main problem was the ad money, because the websites not only were faster, the websites were much less expensive than the paper
And they
ads.
were much more accessible.
And the other thing is that for the same amount of money that you would pay for a single page in a printed
Magazine.
paper, you could create a carpet bombing campaign on a website. So if you knew what website was, which website was the most interesting to people, you could just probably buy, I don't know, I would call it a week of constant bombardment with ads in order to get your visibility up for the same amount of money they would pay for a single page in the printed paper.
Which everybody just goes.
Yes. So I had a talk it was 2010, I think. One of the people, since I was working in the magazine back then, he was working for a major distributor of IT equipment. And he told me that the problem that he has is that he can choose between buying one single page in the paper, having having a print done for, I think it was 50,000 flyers, and then have them distributed by students all over the town, or buying, I think it was something like 3 or 4 days of entirety of a single IT portal, so that everybody who goes to the portal sees at least 3 or 4 of his ads. And it didn't make any sense for him to buy a magazine page.
Okay.
And the ads in the magazines were the bread and butter that pushed the magazines forward.
Because circulation was never good enough, at least on our, let's say,
But
in
I
our
think
territory.
the circulation was never good enough on any territory. The subscriptions were, if you were able to get the subscriptions.
Yeah, and a lot of them. Okay, you mentioned the money, and actually, this is one of the closing questions that I wanted to ask. Do you think that the marketing money that you just described for the new media now, which used to be in the printed media, is going to go away?
I think yes. I think yes, and I think that this is going to be one of those unexpected turn of events that is going to happen because of AI.
Okay.
Because AI by itself is remixing and redoing and recompiling the information that it has on the internet. And this is one of the things that I see right now when it comes to Google versus Microsoft. Bing doesn't need to provide any links to other outside pages. They want to keep a person looking at Bing, so they are trying to keep all the users stuck inside the Bing landing page. Google has an inherent problem because they require people to go and to click and go to other pages because the ads are there. Nobody is paying for Google to just link to the page. They need people to click on the page. When AI is going to be able to not only go to the internet and create a snapshot of the internet and then redo it, relearn it, and whatever. So every couple of
Archive.org squared.
but the problem is the speed. Right now, AI is the same as the magazines were. It takes almost all the AIs that we have today. It takes them a couple of weeks before they are able to parse all the information that they got from the internet. Okay. Once the AI becomes fast enough to be able to parse the information real time, you won't be able to see the ads, because you're going to ask the AI something, you're going to believe it, it's going to become believable, and then you're not going to see the ads. And the only ads that you're going to see are going to be inside the AI. And for the same reason that people hate the ads on the pages, you are going to hate the ads inside the AI generated pages, and this is going to happen. So suddenly you're going to have mediocre content created by AI intertwined with ads that are going to be mediocre, and we are going to come to a version of the internet that I'm going to extremely hate.
Okay. Well, what about the video-based approach of YouTube and whatnot? Do you think that's also going to go down in terms of ad revenue? There have been a lot of things happening in YouTube and Twitch and many others. They're trying to, change the game in terms of the money division. in a sense as well. Do you think?
Reddit shot themselves in the foot by basically
Shutting down.
wiping out the market for the other people who are trying to create clients for the Reddit. Twitter is no more. They've lost so much money that they are barely making ends meet. And Twitter is, from a perspective of somebody who has been using Twitter for 15 years, I'm not longer using Twitter every day. The reason is because
W for me.
Twitter was relevant because it was providing you the information that was topical and relevant, time relevant. Right now, I can see tweets from people from 2 weeks ago, and I don't want another RSS feed of old news. So this is one of the things. But to answer your question, YouTube has a problem. Nobody has that amount of time to wait for the people who are right now turning written news into video formats. And I think that as soon as the AI is going to be able to go to transcriptions and then turn this back into a readable format,
Short abbreviated form.
I think that YouTube videos as they are going to go away. I'm either going to read about something because reading is still much faster than watching YouTube, or I'm going to be watching YouTube videos on a specific topic from a specific author.
And skip all the way through to find the information that you
No,
require.
I'm for example, let's call some like Tom Scott or Veritasium or some other people on YouTube. They make amazing content that is nice to look at, and I want to enjoy it the same way I enjoy, I don't know, Touch of Frost. It's just the TV series. It's just so slow moving that I like it because it makes me want to just watch it and
chill.
And if I want some information quickly, I'm going to read it. I'm not going to watch Antient version that was copy pasted from the internet and then recreated by a computer generated voice in an 8-minute video.
Okay. If you say so, let's see what's going to happen there.
And what about you? What do you think about YouTube?
If they create an AI that is basically, I'm on your path, but a little bit in a different direction. If they create an AI that's able to consume the information and not write an article, but create a video out of that, that is going to first be a big hit, and then it's going to completely devalue the idea of YouTube because it's going to become widely available, and we all know what happens when everything is widely available. It basically loses any significance whatsoever. In terms of if you're talking about IT-related content, maybe some kind of virtual reality is the next step, or maybe something like that. I really don't know. I really don't know what's the next step, because from print to websites, articles, from articles to video, which is where we are now right now, what is the logical next step? Just the voice? Or virtual reality, augmented reality, Vision Pro, simulation?
I think audio. I think what we are going to end up with is going to be a combined audio with written articles, because video is too slow. If you want to consume a lot of information, you're going to read it. If you're going
But
to,
a lot of people remember video better.
okay, but if you want a lot of information, you're going to read it because you need diagrams, you need some sort of interactive materials that you want to take a look at. And if you want to have heavily condensed information, you're going to listen to it, because you are going to stop wasting time while you're driving.
By somebody who actually knows what he or she is talking about.
And the one thing that I thought about right now, and I just realized this. Do you realize that usually the only articles that you actually read are the longer ones done by somebody who paid attention?
Yeah.
And
Always been like that.
And I think that AI is going to enable you to find those articles quickly.
That's excellent.
So it's going to filter out all the
Nonsense.
clickbaity nonsense. And this is going to probably make some sort of money for people who are actually investing their time into the articles. But I don't see that this amount of money is going to be enough for them to pay their bills.
What's then everybody going to do?
We're going to slowly degrade until we find where the bottom is.
Where the bottom is, where the last third of it is.
Yes, and then we are going to start digging.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I'm not as usual. I'm not entirely positive about what the outcome is going to be.
Especially when AI is concerned.
AI is just turning into a tool.
Okay.
But for some things, for example, we were trying to create an exam today. I was experimenting heavily with the AI and creating exams. For some topics, it's enormously useful.
Yeah, very helpful.
Yes, but for some topics, it doesn't make any sense.
I know.
Trying to find also while we are at it, I was asking the same AI the same question with a time difference of 10 seconds.
Different answers.
No, one answer was completely negative. It says, I don't know anything about it, I cannot answer you. Then 10 seconds later, it created the entire page of answers for me. So
Interesting.
it is getting unreliable. And this is
It
one
always
more.
was.
Yes, but no, it wasn't unreliable this way. It was hallucinating or lying. Now it's not even giving you answers. So you cannot trust it at all.
Okay. Well, with that being said, that's a wrap on this episode of That IT Show podcast. We'll see you next time in the next episode. And until then, my name is Vedran,
My name is Yasmin.
and that's it. Bye.
Thank you.